Hi, my friends. Today I want to present you a new story. Enjoy watching it.
The rain fell in relentless sheets, drumming against the diner's windows like an impatient visitor. I sat at the counter, thumbing through the day's receipts, willing the numbers to stretch. It was useless. They refused to lie. I pushed the papers aside and rested my forehead in my hands. The hum of the refrigerator filled the empty space, a stark reminder of how quiet business had been. I glanced at the clock, 8:47 p.m., another 15 minutes and I'd lock up. Outside, the street was deserted, the occasional splash of a passing car, the only sound breaking through the storm. The bell above the door jingled, startling me. I turned to see a man standing in the doorway, soaked to the bone. Water dripped from his coat onto the freshly mopped floor, and his hat, clutched tightly in his hand, looked like it might dissolve from the rain. His gray hair was plastered to his head, and his eyes, though kind, carried a weight I couldn't ignore. Evening, I greeted cautiously, stepping out from behind the counter. I don't have any money, he stammered, his voice barely audible over the rain's din. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other, clearly debating whether to stay or flee. I haven't eaten in days. For a moment, I hesitated. My instinct was to say I couldn't help. How could I, when I could barely keep the lights on? But his trembling hands and hollow cheeks reminded me of the nights I'd gone hungry after my husband passed, scrimping every dollar to feed Tommy and Sophia. I sighed, motioning toward a corner table. Sit, I said firmly. Let me get you something warm. I can't, he began, but I cut him off with a wave of my hand. No arguments. Sit. He obeyed, lowering himself into the chair with a quiet thank you. I disappeared into the kitchen and turned on the stove, pulling out the ingredients for my grandmother's chicken soup. As the broth simmered, the familiar scent of garlic and herbs filled the diner, wrapping me in a moment of bittersweet nostalgia. I sliced a loaf of bread, my movements quick but deliberate. When I placed the bowl in front of him, his hands shook as he picked up the spoon. He took one cautious sip, and his eyes glistened with unshed tears. This reminds me of my mother's cooking, he murmured, his voice thick. He looked at me with something akin to reverence. She must have been a good cook, I replied, sitting across from him. The best, he said with a faint smile. Thank you, truly. As he ate, the tension in his shoulders eased, and the color slowly returned to his face. We didn't speak much, but I didn't mind. His gratitude was unspoken, filling the silence like the rain filled the streets outside. When he finished, he stood and reached into his pocket, pulling out a small piece of paper. I can't repay you tonight, he said, placing it on the table, but I promise this isn't the end of our conversation. Before I could ask what he meant, he nodded once and slipped out the door, disappearing into the rain-soaked night. I picked up the note, frowning. My heart skipped as I read the neatly penned words. Your kindness won't be forgotten. I'll be back. The diner was quiet the next morning, save for the steady scrape of my knife against a carrot. The events of the previous night lingered in my mind as I prepped for the day. The note the old man, Patrick, he called himself, had left sat folded neatly on the counter. I hadn't yet made sense of it, though I must have read it a dozen times. Morning, Mom, Tommy's voice broke through my thoughts. He stood in the doorway, his backpack slung over one shoulder, Sophia peeking shyly from behind him. Morning, sweetheart, I said, forcing a smile. You too ready for school? Yup, Tommy replied, his tone overly cheerful, as if trying to mask his concern. Are we still having spaghetti night tonight? Of course, I assured him, though my stomach clenched at the thought of stretching what little we had left in the pantry. As they headed off, I turned my attention back to the note. There was something peculiar about it, a confidence, a promise, as if Patrick knew something I didn't. With a sigh, I tucked it into the pocket of my apron. It was time to open the diner. The morning passed slowly, the rain outside keeping most of my regulars at home. I'd just begun cleaning the already spotless tables when the bell above the door jingled. I turned to see Patrick standing there, but this time he wasn't alone. Behind him were three sharply dressed individuals, their tailored suits and polished shoes out of place in my humble diner. Patrick's demeanor had changed as well. He stood taller, his eyes bright and purposeful. "Good morning, Jade," he said warmly, his voice steady. "Patrick," I said cautiously, glancing at his companions. "What's going on?" "These are friends of mine," he said, gesturing to the group. "They've been looking for someone with heart and talent, someone who knows how to turn a meal into a memory. And I told them I'd found the perfect person." I blinked, unsure if I'd heard him correctly. "I don't understand." Patrick smiled. "I'll explain everything. May we sit?" I nodded, still stunned, and motioned for them to take a table. As they settled in, Patrick pulled a folder from his briefcase and placed it in front of me. "I believe in what you're doing here, Jade," he said. "And I want to help. This diner is special. It has soul. I want to show my friends just how extraordinary it is." I hesitated, my gaze flickering between him and the folder. My hands trembled as I opened it, revealing proposals, figures, and names I recognized from business magazines. This can't be real," I whispered. "It is," Patrick assured me. "But first, we'd like to try the food." I stared at him, my heart pounding, then nodded. "All right, let's see what you think." As I turned toward the kitchen, the enormity of the moment began to sink in. Whatever was about to happen, my life was about to change. The scent of sizzling garlic and fresh-baked bread filled the diner as I worked quickly in the kitchen. My hands moved on autopilot, chopping, stirring, and plating, but my mind raced. Who were these people, and what did they want with me? "Jade, are you okay?" Patrick's voice called from the dining room. I poked my head out from behind the counter, managing a nervous smile. "Just fine. Your friends like chicken soup, right?" "They'll love whatever you make," he said confidently. I set the bowls down in front of the group minutes later, adding a plate of warm bread to the table. The three strangers exchanged glances before picking up their spoons. The air felt electric as I stood to the side, watching nervously. This is incredible," one of them said after the first bite, a woman with sharp eyes and a notepad in hand. "You made this just now?" "Yes," I replied. "It's my grandmother's recipe. Everything here is made fresh daily." "It shows," another man added, dabbing at his mouth with a napkin. "Patrick wasn't exaggerating about you, Jade." Patrick leaned back in his chair, smiling as if he'd known this would be their reaction. "See? I told you she's the real deal." I crossed my arms, still skeptical. "This is all very flattering, but I don't understand why you're here." The sharp-eyed woman set her spoon down and folded her hands. "We represent a group of investors looking to expand in the restaurant industry. Patrick spoke highly of your diner and your values. After seeing this place for ourselves, we believe it has the potential to grow into something much bigger." I blinked, trying to process her words. "Bigger? Like what exactly?" Patrick leaned forward, his voice calm but persuasive. "Imagine more diners like this one, all across the city, maybe even beyond. Your recipes, your care for every customer, replicated everywhere. We'll provide the funding, the expertise. All you have to do is say yes." I stared at them, my pulse hammering. "This is a lot to take in." "We know," the woman said. "Take your time. But opportunities like this don't come around often." Patrick gave me an encouraging nod. "You've built something special here, Jade. Let us help you share it with the world." I looked down at my hands, still trembling from the whirlwind of it all. Was I really ready for something this big? The diner was unusually busy that afternoon, but my thoughts were elsewhere. Patrick's proposal lingered like the scent of fresh bread in the air, warm, promising, but overwhelming. As I refilled a customer's coffee, the bell above the door jingled, and a man stepped in, his presence immediately shifting the room's energy. He wore a sharp suit and carried himself with an air of authority, his cold eyes scanning the room before landing on me. "Jade Fleming?" he asked, his tone smooth yet piercing. "Yes," I said, wiping my hands on my apron. "Can I help you?" "I'm Richard Walsh," he said, extending a hand I hesitated to take. "I work for a competing investment group, and I've been following the buzz about your diner." "Buzz?" I echoed, narrowing my eyes. He smirked. Let's just say Patrick's involvement has caught some attention. I'd like to talk to you about your options. I'm not sure what you mean, I said, glancing toward Patrick, who was seated at his usual corner table. He stood as soon as he noticed Richard, his expression darkening. Richard, Patrick said evenly, approaching us. I didn't expect to see you here. Patrick, Richard replied, his tone dripping with false camaraderie. Still playing the savior, I see. Patrick ignored the jab and turned to me. Jade, may I have a word? I followed him to the kitchen, my heart pounding. Who is he? I demanded. Someone you don't want to get involved with, Patrick said firmly. Richard represents a group that prioritizes profit over everything else. Quality, values, people. He's only here because he sees dollar signs in your success. I frowned. But what if he's offering something better? Patrick's expression softened. Jade, you've built this diner with heart and integrity. Don't let someone like Richard take that away. Trust me, he'll twist it into something unrecognizable. I nodded slowly, but a seed of doubt had already been planted. As I returned to the dining room, Richard met my gaze with a knowing smile, as if he could sense my uncertainty. Shadows had crept into my newfound light, and I wasn't sure whom to trust. The storm began subtly. First, an anonymous online review accused the diner of cutting corners, claiming the food wasn't as fresh as advertised. Then, a shipment of ingredients I'd ordered arrived spoiled, forcing me to close early for the first time in months. I couldn't ignore the sinking feeling in my gut that this wasn't a coincidence. Patrick sat across from me that evening, his face etched with concern. This has Richard's fingerprints all over it, he said. I don't understand, I whispered, staring at the ruined vegetables. Why would he go this far? He doesn't even own the place. He doesn't need to, Patrick replied. He wants to make you desperate enough to sell, to prove that his way is the only way forward. I clenched my fists. I won't let him destroy what I've built. But the next day, things escalated. A health inspector arrived unannounced, claiming to have received complaints about cleanliness. I was mortified as he walked through the diner, clipboard in hand, while regular customers looked on in confusion. When he finally left, Patrick pulled me aside. You need to confront Richard, he urged. Later that evening, I found Richard waiting outside, as if he'd known I'd come. He leaned against his sleek car, his smirk as sharp as a blade. You can't stop this, Jade, he said, his voice dripping with false sympathy. Sell now, and I'll make sure your name stays attached to the expansion. Refuse, and I'll bury you under paperwork and bad press. I took a deep breath, summoning every ounce of resolve I had. You can try to tear me down, but this diner is more than a business. It's my family's legacy, and I won't let you take it. For the first time, his smirk faltered. The next morning, Patrick arrived with reinforcements, his investor friends. Together, they leveraged their influence to expose Richard's underhanded tactics, rallying the local community to my defense. Customers poured in, showing their support, and by the end of the week, the sabotage had been thwarted. Standing in the now bustling diner, Patrick handed me a framed copy of the original note he'd left months ago. Kindness always wins, Jade, he said with a smile. I hung the note on the wall, its message a constant reminder of how far we'd come and how much further we could go. The storm had passed, and the light shining through was brighter than ever. A week after the storm of sabotage, as the dust began to settle, I found myself sitting at the same corner table where Patrick had first written his life-changing note. Across from me sat the team of investors he had introduced, a group of people who believed in my vision and values as much as I did. You've proven yourself to be more than a business owner, one of them said, smiling warmly. You've built a community. That's something we don't see every day. We're ready to move forward, Jade. Are you? I glanced at Patrick, who nodded reassuringly, his expression calm but encouraging. This is your moment, he said. Taking a deep breath, I reached across the table and shook their hands. Let's do this, I said, my voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions swirling inside me. The year that followed was unlike anything I'd ever imagined. My little diner on the corner became the foundation for a growing chain of 5 locations, each one reflecting the heart and soul of the original. The red and white checkered curtains remained, and my grandmother's recipes were faithfully reproduced in every kitchen. But it wasn't just about the food. I made it a priority to hire people who needed a second chance. Single parents, students, and those down on their luck. Each employee became part of the family, and every customer was treated like one too. On the anniversary of the first diner's transformation, I stood in the bustling dining room, now filled with laughter and the hum of conversation. Tommy and Sophia, now more confident and happy than ever, helped me carry plates to customers. Patrick sat at his usual table, savoring a bowl of chicken soup, his smile full of quiet pride. Above the counter, framed and prominently displayed, was Patrick's original note. Its simple, handwritten message served as a reminder that one act of kindness could create ripples that transformed not just one life, but many. As the sun set on the diner that evening, its warm glow spilling through the windows, I felt something I hadn't in years: peace.
Friends, what do you think of this story? Write your opinion in the comments. Would you like more stories? Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell button so you don't miss any videos. See you tomorrow.